After a third death from Ebola in the Congolese border city of Goma, Rwanda briefly closed the through road, a drastic attempt to limit the disease's spread, but one that threatens the livelihoods of those who commute between the two countries. Hours later, the border was open again, the UN saying closure actually makes it harder to contain Ebola.
There are more remote areas where if you can't go across the main border, you can find a different way. And when that starts to happen, then the ability to check to see if people are symptomatic or not becomes that much more difficult. So it's actually quite counterproductive and not in the interests of either country.
Nearly 2,000 people have died from Ebola so far, but it's been difficult to tackle the virus because this part of the DRC has seen a complex 20-year civil war being fought between rebel groups and the government. 2 decades of conflict means that people living here are suspicious of the authorities, even those aiming to contain the outbreak. And now, for the first time in this region, it's spread to a large border city, Goma. Some are now demanding more action, here picketing UN headquarters. The UN now says that to contain the virus, it must better predict where Ebola might go next.
Let's bring in Trish Newport here. She's from Doctors Without Borders in Geneva, Switzerland, and she's coordinating the organization's Ebola response in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. First of all, how big is the risk of Ebola spreading in Goma and beyond?
There's definitely the risk. So after 1 year of the outbreak, there have been more than 2,700 cases, more than 1,700 deaths. But it's not just those numbers that are concerning. It's the fact that every week, about 40% of the new cases were never identified before as people at risk of having Ebola. What that means is that we don't know who to be monitoring, and we don't know where the people are that could be at risk of developing Ebola. It means we have no visibility over the epidemiological situation, and it definitely increases the risk of spread of the disease.
Talking about the disease spreading, the World Health Organization does not recommend any restrictions on travel, saying that that can actually hamper the fight against Ebola. Can you explain that to us?
Definitely. So when you close borders, the border between Goma and Rwanda has about 15,000 people that pass by the border every day. If you close the border, it doesn't stop people from moving. It just forces them to find unofficial crossings to go through. Right now, the border has screening in place. So they screen and take the temperature of everyone passing through the border. If that closes, you're going to have people passing into the other countries unofficially without their temperatures being screened. So what we really need to do is reinforce the screening that's being done at the borders.
Now, authorities have been, like your organization, have been trying to tackle this Ebola outbreak for more than a year now. Why is it proving so difficult to contain?
It's a great question. So this is the first time that there's been an Ebola outbreak in an area of active conflict. And since the very beginning, there hasn't been a lot of community engagement. So engaging the community in the Ebola response. While that has improved somewhat, we're not necessarily responding to the priorities that the community sees that they have. A lot of people say their priority is making sure they're safe, that they have access to treatment for the other things that kill them, like measles, malaria, diarrhea, and access to clean water. And Ebola is not their priority. And if we don't start listening to them and responding to these other priorities, not just Ebola, we're never going to actually gain the trust of the community, and we won't be able to put an end to this outbreak.